final drive like that, is there a intentional effort to say, okay, we're going to give the ball to James and we're going to run it down their throats?
Yes and no. I think kind of where we were in the game, time left on the clock, their timeouts, their kicker situations certainly impacted a lot of what we did, really in the entire second half. So, I think you always want to stick with what's working. You feel like guys are blocking well in the run game. James is running a high level. I think we still are going to mix in some passes, but certainly we're conscious of keeping the clock running, making sure those guys are using their timeouts to put ourselves in the position we did.
Along those lines, on the previous possession, the touchdown, he carried it on first down for only 3, but then went right back to him and got a first down. And then 2 plays later got it again for 10. Was that an example of seeing it work and then figuring, hey, we just want to keep doing this?
I think so. And there's times where, hey, it goes for 3, but you feel like, wow, that was close. Or, hey, we just missed that. Or we had it here and it just didn't quite hit. So I think there's a balance there. There's other times where it goes for 3 and you're like, God, that should have gone for -2. Like, we got to go a different direction. So I think it's finding a balance there.
Marv wasn't a big factor on Sunday, but everyone else seemed to play significant roles. What's it like to see the offense kind of expand more than just Marv and kind of get everyone?
It's important. I think we're the most difficult to defend when we're spreading the ball around, when everyone has an impact on the offense. Didn't have an impact on the game. He did have a 22-yard third down conversion and a 4th and 6 with the game on the line. But no, I know exactly what you mean, and I think you're right. I think that's when you're difficult to defend, is when you can't just lock in and say, hey, we're going to eliminate this guy or that guy. When guys are playing at a high level and the ball's going, kind of around the field, I think it makes us hard to defend.
Drew, I think James had like 9 yards in the first half and then, of course, a bunch in the second. What was the difference in terms of what you were doing first half, second half?
I think that's always a little bit true with that defense. Like early in the game, they're feeling fresh. They got really good talent up front. They play really hard. Do feel like we were able to wear them down a little bit. So some of those runs that weren't maybe hitting early in the game started to hit there in the second half. But I think it's a little bit of keeping them off balance too and making sure that we're doing things to be hard to defend.
What was going through your mind during the 4th and 5, like right when the ball was down?
Generally, as crazy as it sounds, like I'm probably moved on to the next play call. Like in my mind, I can't be worried. Like if we don't convert, it's a non-issue for me. Like I don't have to call another play. So at that point, it's basically like, all right, what is my 1st and 10 call? Like I have to assume we're converting. We need to go get ourselves in field goal range. Really kind of my mind's already there as the play's being executed. There are even times where I'm like, hey, what play did I call? Like I've called it and I've moved on to the point where I look up at the field. I'm like, I don't know 100% remember what's about to happen. Somebody clue me into what I called. That didn't happen in that situation, but it does happen throughout the game. It was. And I got to watch it after the game and I did enjoy it.
What did that do, though, for, obviously we just talked about Marv, he's had these first quarter touchdowns, but like that play, what do you think that does for him, for Kyler?
I think it continues to build on that confidence and trust they have in each other. At the end of the day, when the game's on the line, it's a guy who's going to go out there and win a one-on-one and go make a tough play. Kyler's the type of guy who's going to hang on in the pocket and give him a chance. And I think everybody in the room feels that on a number of different levels.
Was that the play to go out there to Marv? And if so, was the pressure more than was expected? I mean, obviously, I'm sure in a perfect world, Kyler's not backpedaling when he's throwing that ball.
Ideally, there's no one near him, and it is routes on air. But I think that's the reality. And I've said this to the offense a number of times. Like, generally in this league, in critical situations against good teams with the game on the line, it is rush 5 or 6 and play man. That's what good teams do, more often than not. Not that they always live in that world. So I wasn't completely surprised by the look. I'm sure Kyler wasn't completely surprised by the look. If you look throughout the league, great defenses in critical situations, that's typically where they're hanging their hat because they say, hey, we're good. We match up better one-on-one than you do, and we're going to go out there and show you. And I think those guys, kudos to them for going out and making that play.
Is that just a matter of just 2 guys making the play, Kyler putting it where it had to be, but Marvin also making the adjustment with his body to be in position to catch it?
Absolutely. Yeah, without question.
Kyler's run, the 50-yard run, obviously you move on to the next play, but is there a point where you look up and you're like, I don't need another play?
Yeah, I think it was interesting. Like, you don't always feel this in any of the run game, but there's times where the second or third level of the defense kind of disappears, and you could see his reaction when he's at the 42-yard line. Honestly, I kind of had a similar reaction because you kind of saw the safety tighten down into the middle of the formation, and you kind of saw it open up. You're like, there's nobody left. And, certainly we know how fast he is. So I felt pretty early in that run, I was like, I'm pretty sure this is scoring. And at that point, I don't have an next play in my mind because I know I have an explosive, and I'm like, I'm at the 20, the 10, the 5. Like, that certainly wasn't in my thought process. But I did. I think that was when you felt early like, wow, this is probably gone.
Not having Matt Prater and having Chad Ryland, how do the conversations differ with Jeff Rogers or with Gannon in terms of how aggressive you were, or whether or not you guys were going to go for it and then ended up going for the field goal?
From my standpoint, not at all. Because I'm not involved in. Generally, it's like, hey, here's the line, or here's when we're going for it. Like that's the only part of the conversation I get, which really helps me out in terms of how I call second and third down and manage the game. So I didn't feel any difference in any of that.
Back to the Kyler run. Why did you feel like you guys were able to get Kyler more involved with his legs in this game?
I think it's a combination of things, and we've talked about this before. Like we call runs for him, read runs, and different options where he has the ability to keep the ball. And sometimes those come up the way that he's pulling the ball. Sometimes we're handing off to James. And in this game, for whatever reason, based on the defensive look or the timing of the call, he had the opportunity to pull a couple, and it was good to see him, obviously make successful runs out of those.
Another thing with Kyler this year, he's been really effective off of play action. You guys went to that a lot on Sunday. What is making that possible for him?
I think, certainly the dynamic run game helps him out. I mean, when people have to defend both of those and they look very similar, I think it creates a lot of indecision on the, even at the third level at times on a defense in terms of like, should I be fitting the run? Does he still have the ball in his hand? Where are we, trying to stop things from a defensive perspective? So it's something we certainly try to do at a high level.
I feel like you guys were able to keep the defense off balance this week better than maybe some previous games.
Yes and no. I think a lot of it was players, playing at a high level as much as it was the scheme.
What kind of stress does Kyler put on a defense when he can't get outside and James is going?
I think it's really hard. I mean, I like to think it's really hard. I'd certainly have to ask them. But I think, as we talked about, like, what are you committing to stopping? Like, all right, we're going to stop the run. Well, what are you doing in the play-action game? Okay, we've stopped the play-action game. Well, or is Kyler contained in the pocket? He has such an ability to create off schedule. I think when we're really operating at a high level on offense, all those things are working.
You've talked since you got here about just scoring one more point than the opponent. What was your overall takeaway of the offensive performance Sunday?
We got one more point than the opponent. No, I think and it's the same mindset that we've tried to approach every Monday with. And I think that has to stay consistent. Whether you win by 1, whether you win by 20, lose by 1, lose by 20, it's here's what we did good, here's where we need to improve. And I know I keep harping on that, but that's real. Like if we're going to be where we want to be as a team, as individuals, as a coach, like it wasn't perfect. There's certainly things that we can clean up and be better at. There's things that we did at a really high level that we need to continue to do. So I really don't think that mindset changes at all.
We've talked about the offense's identity throughout the season. What does a returning Zay Jones add to that identity?
I think another really talented piece that understands what we're trying to accomplish, that can go out there and create mismatches on the outside and make plays with the ball. So, certainly excited to see him back on the field.
On that final possession, Will, of course, wasn't out there. How do you rate what John Tristan did, and did that not affect pretty much anything you did in that drive, even with him not there?
It really didn't, and I think that speaks to him being ready for his opportunity. You saw that last year, and look, that was a critical situation. He wasn't expecting to be in the game and went out there and executed the plays to the best of his ability and allowed us to operate the offense at a high level, so I was really pleased with that.
And speaking of that, on the play after Will went out was the touchdown to Elijah, and I know he pulled. How much crucial was that to sell the fact that Kyler was probably might run?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, certainly the gap scheme actions are something that we try to hang our hat on a little bit because it does create that indecision when you see guys pull and you see the double teams on the front side. So, I think that's a part of who we want to be.
And he was able to go out there in that situation, first play,
yeah,
and obviously executed.
Yeah, really impressive.
Does losing your starting right side of the offensive line change anything for you in game planning?
No, I think certainly we're always going to adjust to who's out there and what the matchup is each week. That's as much as who we have as in terms of who they have across rooms. So I don't see a major change in who we are or our philosophy as an offense.
Such an enforcer and a presence out there, enforcer, protector, whatever you want to call it. But how do you sort of fill that void, that sort of the intangible void? And then is this where the versatility of all your offensive linemen comes into play to be able to do that?
Certainly it's hard. I mean, Will's a talented player who's playing at a high level. You just talked about what he brings to the offense. So, feel terrible for him. You never want to see a guy get hurt, especially a guy that puts so much into it like Will does. But we have, unfortunately, that's the reality of the situation we're in. And I do, as you said, we have a lot of guys who I feel very confident to step into that role and continue to allow our offense to operate at a high level.
Back to Kyler for a second. Have you seen him be more comfortable running this year compared to when he came back last year, in those last 8 games?
Again, he would probably answer that better than me. I certainly think that he's willing to run, but I can remember the Philly game last year towards the end. He took a quarterback run for a big gain there in a critical situation. So I wouldn't say he seems a lot more comfortable, but physically he would probably be able to answer that better than me.
It looked like you had Trey really involved, a lot of different plays, showing the pass, and the touch that could have been a touchdown. Just, does that show just how crucial it is to have him out there?
Absolutely. Trey's a big part of what we do and always will be and always has been, I think, just because of what he brings to our offense. Kind of as we talked about, like shows up in the run game, dynamic with the ball in his hands, really good route runner, can put stress on a defense in terms of who are you covering him with, how do you feel about that matchup. So he's always going to be a big part of who we are.
I know he hit the touchdown, but what have you seen from Elijah in the run game as a blocker, in his second year at the position?
I think he just seems very comfortable in that role. Like, it's not like, hey, he's a wideout playing tight end, or hey, it's year one in a position and he's trying to feel in his way. He's trying to perfect the details of it. He's trying to understand the nuance of it, and I think he's doing a really nice job with that.
Is Chip doing a pretty good job too there? I know he was probably on the field a lot there at the end in terms of the blocking.
Yeah, I mean, and I've been really impressed to come in as year one and to take on the role that he's taken on and to do it at the level that he's done it with is really impressive. Been really pleased with that.
JG said yesterday you guys put a lot of the players mentally. You feel that way too in terms of what you're doing schematically?
Absolutely. And again, it's our job as coaches to, one, make sure they can understand it, and two, that it's organized in a way that makes sense. But I think if you're going to be difficult to defend in this league, you need to be able to move people around the formation. You need to be able to move in and out of different schemes in both the pass and the run game. So, I think we do challenge those guys throughout the offseason as we get through the season, mentally and physically.